In today's episode of the Real Estate Crowdfunding Show Syndication in the Digital Age at GowerCrowd.com, you're going to learn exactly how to raise money online for your real estate projects from a 30-plus year skyrise office owner and operator, a GowerCrowd client, Larry Feldman, who is reinventing the office building in his position as CEO of Feldman Equities in Tampa, Florida. Now, the most important part of real estate development, as you know, is raising the money you need to finance your deals. And this applies as much to a seasoned professional as it does to developers just starting out. When the laws changed a few years back, allowing you to do this online, this totally revolutionized the capital formation process for real estate, making it dramatically easier to grow your investor network and equity pipeline by using the sheer power of social media and digital marketing to automate the effort for you. Larry Feldman has decades of experience owning and operating downtown skyrise office buildings. His family has over 100 years of experience in real estate. In fact, they built the 2 terminals at Chicago O'Hare Airport. You're probably familiar with those. And so you might think that a guy like this would be a bit set in his ways when it comes to adopting revolutionary changes like going online to raise capital for your deals. Well, find out today exactly what Larry is doing to raise money for his projects online and how you can do it too. Why you should move to the online world to attract a new generation of high net worth investors. Why you shouldn't worry about having too many investors, heaven forbid, and some of the secrets of success from one of the foremost real estate developers in the country. Now, be sure to go to the show notes page for today's episode where you're going to find a bunch of resources you can use. I'll include a short video of the before Feldman Equities website and a link to the after version once the team here at GowerCrowd got involved, right? Before and after of the website. Apart from the sleek new look, be sure to look for the calls to action buttons we installed on the website and sign up there to see how a sequence of automated messages comes your way from Larry and his team in exactly the way that you can have the same kind of communication with new investors on your own website. Plus, check out the whiteboard workshop that you can also find on the podcast page at GowerCrowd.com, where I walk you through the entire investor acquisition system that we are building out for Feldman Equities so you can build one yourself. That is all on the podcast page at GowerCrowd.com. All right, now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to my client, downtown skyrise office owner and operator, the creator of the radical officectomy, Larry Feldman, CEO of Feldman Equities. Larry, thank you so much for two super important things. One, thank you for being a client and for being an absolutely wonderful client. And secondly, thank you for being on my podcast. My greatest interest in talking to you today, as ironic as it is, perhaps, to ask you this question, but why are you going this extra mile to do some of the most advanced digital marketing in the real estate industry? And as I said before we even started, I don't think there's any other skyrise office owner in America doing anything remotely close to the digital marketing that you're doing. So I'd love to find out what makes you tick. Why are you doing this?
That's a great question, Adam, and thank you for having me on the show. So I have been in the real estate business for about 35 years. And actually, my dad preceded me and my grandfather preceded me, and now my son is 4th generation. Now, my dad used to say that the commercial real estate business is somewhat like a manufacturing plant. A developer, the role of a developer is somewhat like a manufacturing plant, where at one end of the manufacturing plant, by the loading dock area, the tractor trailer loads pull up. But the only difference in the real estate business versus, say, the widget business is that the tractor trailer loads need to be filled with cash because this is a very capital intensive business. So while real estate developers have a very inflated ego, and a lot of people think I sit in a vault counting gold coins and I fly around in private jets all day and go on 2-month vacations in the Riviera, it really isn't exactly like that. What it actually boils down to is, at times, I'm a professional beggar for capital. And even though we've got some of the largest institutional joint venture partners in the world who we've had great relationships with, the money runs hot and cold. So, for example, we partnered a while back ago, and I probably shouldn't say the name, but let's just say it's one of the largest financial institutions in the world. And we hit the ball out of the ballpark. We literally hit like a 40% IRR overnight with this particular fund. But 2 years later, they had decided to pull back from the real estate business, where we felt it was like the second or third inning of the recovery. And so we saw a lot more opportunity, but that spigot had turned off. Even though we hit a home run for them, they extolled our virtues, in fact, talked about us at a national conference. Then the money just sort of turned off. And so, and then a lot of times our joint venture partners will say, the problem with you, Larry, is you own office buildings. We only want to buy apartment buildings right now. And we want to buy them in San Diego, not in Tampa. So we get that sort of thing all of the time. The other source of money that we've taken in over the years are from what are referred to as opportunity funds. And we've had great relationships with these folks, and we've made a lot of money with them. These are funds that take in high net worth individual investments. They take in endowment money from charities or the like, and they take in money from all different sources, and they aggregate it. They charge fees to those investors. They charge promoted equity, which means they get a disproportionate share of the reward. Some people call a promoted interest a carried interest. They get all sorts of benefits, and then we get the money invested from this opportunity fund into one of our deals. And then, of course, we have to charge certain fees to manage the real estate, to lease it. And we also want to earn and promote. So in effect, it's a very inefficient way of investing for the original investor, because there has been what we call a double promote, meaning 2 bites have been taken out of the apple from the same investor, when the ideal scene would be to go directly to the investor, directly to the developer. So this is a way of sort of bypassing the middleman. The fancy term for this is disintermediation. So all sorts of disintermediation is happening over the internet, and price efficiency is being obtained for the investor, meaning the investor is getting charged less fees. There's less of a bite out of his investment because he's investing directly with the real estate developer. So that excites us. And then the idea that we could access a virtually unlimited pool of investors nationally, and eventually we want to go international with our platform. We love that idea because you have a depth that is virtually infinite. And if you market well and produce great results to those investors, it's literally infinite in terms of the availability of capital that you have.
Larry, so there's a very important word that you used in your last sentence, and that was to, well, it's a phrase, but to market well.
Right,
And from our experience or our relationship as we've got to know each other,
right,
I know that you place a very high value on marketing.
right.
And so our work together is digital marketing. But tell me about how you have come to understand marketing as being an important part of your success. And then we can talk about that transition from the way you used to do it to the
Sure,
way you've decided to do it now. So,
right. So the beginnings of my real estate career were in the 1980s, and I developed a tower in Midtown Manhattan called Tower 45. And the delivery of this building to the market, meaning the completion of the construction, was at the absolute worst possible time in the history of New York, or certainly one of the worst recessions New York had had in the last 30, 40 years. Perhaps worse than the '08 recession was the 1990 recession, which followed the savings and loans collapse and on a national basis, but it infected every part of the real estate business, particularly in Manhattan. We had developed this 40-story tower, which we had pre-leased with a grand total of 6% pre-leasing commitments, meaning the day the building opened, it was 93% vacant. And I think I mentioned this to you before. We calculated that every day that went by, it was roughly $44,000 a day we were losing in interest. It was about a $140 million construction loan and debt that we had on the property. So the construction loan, the real estate taxes, the insurance, and so on was about $44,000 a day, the cost of the vacant space, which you can really, you can kind of lose your mind if you take it too seriously. Unfortunately, we didn't take it too seriously, but, we broke it. I remember thinking to myself, well, if I go to sleep, that's going to cost me about $8,000, $9,000. If I take a shower, that's about $400 or $500. And if I go to the bathroom, well, depending, we won't go into detail, but you get the idea. So you could kind of really lose your mind on that. And we decided to have fun with it. We actually, instead of really going crazy mentally, taking it too seriously, we decided to have a lot of fun. And how it all started was that the ad firm came to me that we had hired, a big fancy New York ad firm that represented virtually every major real estate developer who had developed a high-rise office tower. And Manhattan hired this firm, and they said, Larry, here is your bill. We want you to sign on this. $50,000 for the Wall Street Journal, $50,000 for the New York Times, full-page ads. You've got to do it. Every building always does this. And I said, wait a minute. I'm going to spend $100,000 on ads one time, and this is going to be shown, in the case of the New York Times, maybe to ladies going to sales at Macy's in New York to buy, bedding for a new bed that they bought. Am I really effectively targeting the marketing? So in college, I sort of majored in sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But I did learn a few things, and I actually, believe it or not, still remember one or two things. When I went to college, I had these two former Harvard MBA young guys that were were actually out in the marketing world themselves, running a marketing firm. And so I took this marketing course, and they hammered home, know exactly who you're marketing to. So it was one of the few things that I remembered and I learned from college. So I said, we actually do 90 to 95% of our leases through commercial real estate leasing brokers. So these were not just brokers who did homes. In fact, the brokers we deal with almost never sell a home. They are strictly specialists in commercial office leasing. And we discovered that they did about 90–95% of our deals. So we said, why not channel all of that marketing money to that discrete group? And we went ahead and did that. But we did it to the nth degree. We literally bombarded these 300 brokers in New York City who are specialists in commercial leasing. Every week, literally, we somehow contacted them. Now, that might have been a coffee mug with the name of the building and the leasing telephone number. It was squeeze balls, which was big in 1990.
God, right.
A lot of tense people in New York. And one of the most notable things we did was we sent out 300 live trees with seedlings. These were seedlings of the trees that were going to be in our atrium as we completed the building we were building. It's a 40-story tower in Midtown Manhattan, which had an outdoor atrium. The outdoor atrium had trees. And so we found the seedling company that actually had that exact tree, and we put it in a root ball in a box, and on one side of the box was your planting instructions for your new tree, and on the other side of the box was all kinds of leasing information and why you should lease space in the building, or why the broker should procure a tenant to lease space in the building. And it was like the greatest hit we ever did. Years later went by, people would come up to me and say, Larry, you know, I still have your tree.
Right, and you had a lot of success, didn't you, with that? You leased up the building.
We traced numerous leases to that event because it got written up in the New York Times that we had done it, and it was a hugely read article in the New York Times. It was as if I had spent 10 times the $50,000 ads in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times from 3 articles that we got because of the creativity of it. But here is the thing, and coming back to how it relates to 2019 and crowdfunding. We set out this concept, which was that the amount of quantity that we were sending out in measurable quantity, we had this concept would equal the amount of leads coming in. It was a hypothesis. We didn't know. We were only 6% leased. We didn't know for sure, but that was the hypothesis. So we had this ever increasing ramping up and ramping up and ramping up of marketing going on all year following the opening of this empty building. P.S. a year later, we were over 90% leased in the middle of what was a near depression in the real estate business. All around us, buildings were being foreclosed, and we were one of the few surviving buildings that had been built in that era that had not been foreclosed and taken over by the bank. That's how bad the situation was and how good our situation was. And I never forgot it. A real estate developer came up to me and said, Larry, this was a guy being foreclosed. He said, how did you do this? He was like, he just wanted to know. And I told him, but I don't know that it registered, you know, because what I'm saying sounds so simplistic. But it's really the number of flows out equals the number of flow in. That's
right, but it's not just volume, is it, Larry? It's the quality of the outflow. It's the
no doubt. It's the quality. It has got to be there, and the create and the fun part of it. That's what was so interesting about that 1990 experience. We were making very creative ads. We were sending it out in massive, ever increasing quantity. So we were doing
to the same people, right? So let me ask you, what of the things that you and I are doing together, the things that you've seen me produce, right, from conversations like this, the videos, the articles, the thumbnails, just this massive what similarity do you see between what we're doing today and connect the dots with that
Sure,
experience.
sure. One of the things that I love that I had never seen this done before was what you just created, which are these little 2-minute snippets, I call them. I don't know what the word you have for them, but it's like a 2-minute video, which is an edited down version of maybe a half-hour talk that I might have done with you. And you have a more flattering picture of me, by the way, than I look currently. So that was nice.
It's your high school graduation picture. The same. I use that one for me as well.
And alongside is actually in very bold letters what I'm stating in words. So you hear the audio, and then up on the screen, you're seeing the actual words coming up and scrolling. And there's a couple of cool graphics that are coming up showing the sort of the sonic electronic. And it's very eye-catching. I can email these out en masse. And the thing that you educated me on that I've never thought about before, it never even dawned on me before, is you keep putting these into a library and putting these into a library, and it's massively accumulating, and it's a lot of work for us to do this, but then it's forever. It's there, and it's working for me day and night. You know, when I'm asleep at night, you know, somebody could be clicking this stuff on, and 5 years from now, they might be clicking it on, because the things I talk about are not just faddish. That, you know, I'm talking about a story that happened in 1990 that's still relevant in 2019.
That's right. It's fascinating, isn't it? It becomes an asset to the company. It's actually an asset.
Right.
That's
a good point.
Yeah. So how have you raised money? Just paint a quick picture of how you've raised money in the past. You've alluded to it. I think you said a lot of your time is spent begging for capital. What does that, I mean, I know because I've done this as well myself throughout my career, and it's changed now with digital, but describe that process briefly. What does that actually look like before the digital era?
Sure.
And then let's talk about how it's actually the same, really, but in a different way today.
Sure. Well, one of the things we specialize in, and our main focus is in high-rise buildings in downtown environments. So I'm sitting right now in the Wells Fargo Center building in downtown Tampa. This is a building that we are currently in joint venture ownership with New York Life Insurance. When people see a big high-rise building like this, including some very sophisticated people in our business, they automatically assume that I'm in ownership with somebody like New York Life Insurance. Historically, insurance companies were some of the most prevalent owners. In fact, if you went into virtually any downtown 20 years ago, you could just walk down a street and sure, it would be likely that you would run across a building that was owned at least in part, if not wholly, by an insurance company. And the reason that they like high-rise buildings in downtowns is that they're steady Eddie, what we call coupon clippers, meaning the cash flow is very steady and very safe. So when they sell life insurance premiums to 30-year-old, recently married couple with maybe 1.2 kids, they are hoping that that person lives to 104, so they don't have to pay the insurance premium. And all during that period, they own these office buildings, and they keep throwing off dividends. So by the time that person dies, they have not only enough money to pay the premium, but they've also got a lot of money left over, which they call profit. So that's the history and the reason why you see these big, giant institutions owning these high-rise buildings. But it was, you know, the average investor, even, you know, somebody that has $500,000 or $100,000 to invest, would just walk by one of these office buildings and just say, oh, well, that's just way out of my league. I wouldn't even look at something like that. Now, all of a sudden, we have democratized the business through crowdfunding. And it really opens up a whole new world for.
So in the past, you would raise money from institutional investors, and that would be a meeting, presumably with them, or you'd present your deal. You would have to explain your background if they didn't know you already, and your track record, and then you would explain the numbers on the deal, and there'd be a negotiation, etc. Right? That's basically how.
Yeah, major institutions are devourers of information. They have databases that give them demographic information. They want you to provide a tremendous amount of information. The process could go on for many months before an investment is committed. The good news with an institution, though, is that they write one check. So after 6 months of, pardon my expression, proctological examination, you do get the money. And, it's a great thing to have one check.
Now, have you raised money from individual investors as well over the years? High net worth
folks, friends and family, the golf club buddies, those kind of things are typical of real estate developers. But it's a finite source, and then sometimes you feel uncomfortable about leaning on family or close friends to be your investors, and there's a limit to how many times you want to go to that bucket. So you really need, like going back to that story my dad told, with the tractor trailer loads, you need to constantly have those tractor trailer loads of cash coming into the manufacturing plant in order to, it's got to be a constant inflow. So
okay, so let's continue that analogy, because it's or metaphor. It's quite an interesting one, actually.
Right.
So the tractor brings a huge, great big shovel full of products, right, raw materials, dumps it in, and you're able to do everything you want for weeks and weeks.
Right.
But with crowdfunding, you got people walking up to that back door with a teaspoon, right? Right, or a small shovel and dropping it in. So to adopt that, to continue that thought,
sure.
Aren't you concerned that having a wave of having too many investors all asking questions and how do you manage them and everything? So what have your thoughts about that?
Sure. We've started to staff up for that. We've done 2 very successful offerings. We have now a very personable, people-friendly young lady in our office that interfaces with the investors, an IR person. As we do more deals, the economy of scale of being able to keep her full-time on doing this starts to become more efficient. We find that if we stay out ahead of the investors with good regular newsletters that are good, sufficient detail, and communicate often with investors and create a Q&A section in our websites, those are all the things that we're doing to help improve communication, to stay out ahead of it rather than wait for investors to call us up and say, what the hell is going on? We stay out ahead of it. So the idea, though, to have a constant flow of even small investments is terrific. That we are now working with you and setting up our own portal on our own website. We are working with CrowdStreet.com, where we do our marketing through them, but as an adjunct to them, we'll be actually able to market directly to investors very, very shortly on our own website. That is an ideal scene for us, where we will have a fund that will establish a certain amount of working capital so that when we see an opportunity, we can pounce on it. A lot of the relationships that we have in the business are from owners, brokers who have a deal that is not publicly known. It might be what we call an off-market deal that we want to buy discreetly. And the seller might be, in a position where, let's say, his lender is sort of knocking on his door. He may have, significant vacancy, hasn't really been able to reinvest in the property, and he's got to sell quick. You want to have the dry powder to execute quickly. So having a fund set up where money is coming in constantly and replenishing money in that fund to go out and buy a deal so that by the time that deal closes, more money now is coming in for the next deal. This is the ideal scene for a real estate developer. And it gets us more focused on running our business day to day, which is acquiring, renovating, and leasing up and owning and managing office buildings. So rather than being a professional beggar for money.
Excuse me. So while you take a quick drink of your vodka there, I know you like to drink when we speak. So one of the for most of your history, you have raised money from institutional investors. So that's been a very, very small group of people to whom you have shared, or with whom you have shared absolutely everything. So now basically you're doing the same thing on an industrial scale with individual high net worth investors. Aren't you concerned that the intelligence and knowledge and experience that you've built up over the last 30 years is going to be widely known, and your secret sauce will no longer be secret?
You know, it's a funny thing. My wife sometimes says to me, Larry, you can't give out all your secrets over the internet. Don't write these articles. And I say, you know, at this stage of my life, I actually feel like I love the teaching aspect. And every time I have to teach something, I actually learn more. My dad used to say, you never begin to learn a subject until you have to teach it. And so it's true that at times people do take our ideas. You know, when we first got to Tampa, we bought a lot of underperforming or even distressed office buildings, and they had virtually no what we call amenities. So what do I mean by amenities? In every building we bought, we put in what you would consider to be a first-class fitness center, a real fully equipped gym with typically $100,000 or more worth of brand new commercial grade gym equipment, shower facilities, locker rooms, what you'd expect to pay 30, 40, 50 bucks a month or more for a full service gym. We basically gave that almost for free to our tenants. Then we put in chill zones, which were 24/7 laptop areas with a cappuccino machine running. You could come into a space 2 o'clock in the morning. We upgraded all of our lobbies and our common areas. So we did all these things, you know, shoe shine, car detailing, you name it, we put in. And then other people started to imitate that, and now everybody's doing it. So now we have to up our game. And, you know, we like to say we're reinventing the office building. So we're going to, you know, we're working on some really cool new ideas to up our game. So yeah, it's possible people will take our ideas, but it'll just make us better, you know, and I'm not really worried about it.
So we've been working together for just 60 days. And in fact, before we started this podcast, it's actually interesting time to be talking today. You gave me the thumbs up to launch. Basically, time to go live. We've done a lot of work over the last 60 days.
Yes, we have.
Go live. So it's an interesting moment for us. This is the before. All being well, in a few months, we'll have another. I said we'll have another podcast from hammocks in Hawaii or something, right? Celebrating results. Let's hope so. But in the first 60 days, let me ask you, what has been your experience of gearing up to go digital? And I suppose I have another question that I'll follow up with in a moment as well. But what has been your experience? What have been the kind of the most surprising things, maybe the hardest things?
You know, I listen to almost all of your podcasts. I love listening to your podcasts. I've learned something from every one of them. And there was a recurring theme that I would say at least 2 or 3 or 4 of your guests identified, which was be authentic in how you do these presentations, or whether you're doing articles or you're doing videography, be authentic. So I also took from that page of the old playbook where we from 1990 where we had fun. And so you and I have had fun over the last 60 days. It's been hard work also. But, you know, for example, when you were here in our offices, we just did a freewheeling tour of the building with the cameramen. This was actually an idea that came from one of your podcasts. I forget who it was, the famous videographer that has this 1 million followers on YouTube.
Yeah, Gary Lipovetsky, right?
Right. And he said, you asked him, what do you suggest for a real estate guy doing crowdfunding? And he suggested a sort of a show and tell, you know, where you would actually walk through the real estate and show people what we were doing. So on the spur of the moment, with no script whatsoever, we just started walking through the building with a cameraman and my second in command, and we were joking it up and, you know, just talking about some of the things we had done with the renovation and how we leased up the building. And we went into bathrooms and into elevators and showed how we renovated them and how our elevators are so much faster now that the lawyers have more billing time because they shaved a minute a day off of each lawyer, and at the end of the year it added up. So we did all kinds of goofy things like that and had fun doing it. And so it wasn't a chore. And you know what I realized about marketing is it has to be the heart and soul of your business to be successful today. Business just doesn't come to you. You got to reach out and get it, and want to have fun in the process of doing
that. I'm so glad that you're having fun. I'm having a real blast, as you know, working with you as well.
Good.
And I will put a link to that video that you just described up on the show notes page for anyone that wants to see it. I'll make sure.
Terrific.
So what are your expectations? Let's wrap up with one final question here, and then I've got 3 what I call sign-off questions.
Sure.
I ask all of my guests.
Yep.
Excuse me. So we are at launch. This is it. We're about to take off. What are your expectations, right? This is like when we press that button, what do you expect? What are your hopes and expectations?
Well, the older I get, the more I believe in UPOD as opposed to OPOOD. UPOD is under promise, over deliver, and OPOOD is over promise, under deliver, and it has a double entendre.
Right. Got it.
And so I do that with myself also. So I don't necessarily believe, you know, this is going to have, you know, result in $1 million a minute coming in an investment. It's a long-term investment. It's creating this library that we've talked about that is something that we're going to constantly build and constantly sow, almost like you would a garden. Your garden just doesn't, you don't just throw some seeds down and come back 6 months later. It's a constant effort. So I'm under promising to myself on this effort. I think that over time it's something that's going to happen. One of your podcasters, the Origin Investment folks, astounded me with the $103 million that they raised in 24 hours or whatever the number was. But if you listen to the woman that you interviewed, she said that was a year's worth of work that led up to that, over a year's worth of work in building the database and building the content that really gives back to the community that you hope to attract, which is making yourself a valuable resource on the internet. So you and I have spent a lot of time just kind of doing a Vulcan Vulcan mind meld.
We have, haven't we?
36 years of the business being spewed out into video, which fortunately you've been able to transcribe it into articles and so on. All of that educational aspect, I hope will be a great resource for folks interested in office building, investing, or just investing in real estate in general.
Larry, thanks so much. I have 3 sign-off questions. I ask
Sure.
all of my guests the same 3 questions.
Okay.
At the end. So what's the most important thing somebody somebody's thinking about syndicating real estate online, what's the most important thing they should keep in mind?
I think they need to have a very clearly defined strategy in their business that they can articulate in a small paragraph, and they should build content online that reflects who they are, that needs to be authentic. They need to be constantly updating and upgrading and making that part of their business all the time. The mistake I have made, and I learned this early on, is doing what I call flash in the pan marketing, where I wait until our buildings run down from 95% to say 70% occupancy or less. And I go, oh my God, we've got a market, we've got to do something. And we rush out and we spend some money and then, sit back. And then, so we get some business come in and then it goes like this. We wind up with a roller coaster effect from flash in the pan marketing. So I would say it's got to be constant. It's got to be part of your heart and soul. And it's got to be ever increasing and ever happening in your company.
Thank you. Last question. So my question is typically, what are the key daily habits that you have to be successful online? But just your kind of key daily habits that make you successful.
Well, the first thing I did was hire you.
Thank you.
Because you do so much of the grunt work that I couldn't possibly even imagine getting done or even know how to get done. But I've also brought in resources in our team and made it a fun exercise where everybody in the company is contributing and helping to write articles and edit articles. And it's kind of become, everybody owns it in the company. And so I think that outsourcing to somebody who knows what they're doing and then having all of the disciplines, whether it be SEO or it be videography and so on, and somebody who understands all of that and putting it all together, because it's not just one thing that works. Having all of those disciplines functioning together, I think has made it a success to date, and we're really excited about our future. So thank you very much for everything you've been doing.
Oh, I'm really having a blast, as you know. It's fabulous.
Good.
Larry Feldman, Feldman Equities. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
That was GowerCrowd client Larry Feldman, CEO of Feldman Equities, talking about why and how he's employing state-of-the-art digital marketing to raise capital for his projects. And although he didn't mention it, he actually uses the same techniques to promote every aspect of his business, from communicating with brokers to finding tenants, etc. He is one of the real estate industry's truest forward-thinking veterans, and a fellow I can report firsthand is a great pleasure to work with. Check out the show notes for today's episode, where you'll find before and after links to the Feldman website as a great example of what you get working with us here at GowerCrowd, as well as to gain access to the whiteboard workshop where I walk you through how to build the exact same digital marketing system that we're building for Larry, so you can build one yourself to raise money online for your real estate projects. That's all at GowerCrowd.com on the podcast page. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Larry. Can I have a hamburger, please? Feldman, CEO at Feldman Equities, for being my guest today. And of course, for being one of my favorite clients. That's all for this episode. I'll see you next time around. And for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.